All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode number 233 of the Restoring Rapport podcast. We are super excited for the content we've got planned out for you guys today. As always, this is a podcast for young believers who are pursuing the goal of marriage and family and looking to get married as soon as possible in a healthy way. I'm joined by my co-host, Landon Mock. This week, we come on twice a week, every week, to discuss not only the benefits of getting married young, but we equip and encourage you to move towards that life goal. Landon, how have you been doing this week?
Doing pretty good, man.
Awesome.
Just enjoying some time with the family and getting in the gym. It's been
Yep.
been a good week.
Good. Lainey and I have been doing the same. We got to go to her family's this past week, went to my family's yesterday, and we've been going to, there's a gym 5 minutes from our house, which is super nice. So keeping our bodies in a healthy condition as well as our minds and all that. So going well on this end too, but really excited for what we're going to bring you guys today. We're going to be reviewing a recent article. Actually, it's not so much an article as it is a series of stats that was put out by Barna on the state of marriage ministry and kind of how much of our resources and attention and finances are actually going towards marriage ministry and encouraging young people to pursue that as a goal as compared to other ministries that we have. And so really excited to get into these stats. The Barna, I think when I read that name, I immediately thought of the author of a book that I really, really like called Pagan Christianity. George Barna and Frank Viola wrote that. We've actually interviewed Frank Viola on the show. Have not got to interview Barna yet, but I think these stats may have been done by him. I need to look into that to actually, before I say that though, to make sure I'm not giving you false information. But I think Barna is the one behind this. And again, this is an article. It's actually a PDF that you can download, but through the Communio website. So we'll include the link to this article in the show notes if you're interested in reading it for yourself. But without further ado, Landon and I are going to just kind of go through these slides and break down kind of what we're doing in the church and to encourage people to get married. Not only that, but also in sustaining and growing marriages once people have decided to pursue that road. And I think what you're going to be surprised a lot by in this article is the fact that marriage ministry is not a common thing, which is why I think not only is this podcast really needed and a much necessary show in the world today, but also just encouraging other people to do the same and start up their own little marriage ministries insofar as you're able. Because it really is a need. The church is not doing, and when I say the church, I mean both Catholics and Protestants, as you're going to see in the article, are not doing a whole lot in the world of marriage ministry. And there are lots of reasons for that. There are many kinds of ministries, so their resources are being allocated across all of those ministries. So sometimes you just don't have as much to give in the direction of marriage ministry. But I would argue that's a very important thing to put resources and time and money and investment into. And so we're going to kind of break that down for you guys today. But the first slide that you can see on the screen if you're a subscriber or watching on YouTube says that 8% of all churches report having a ministry for singles that promotes healthy dating. So 8% of the churches that you're going to be able to walk into today are actually going to have, a young people's ministry that's actually encouraging them to move towards that goal or equipping them to move towards that goal if they've already decided that's something for them, that's something they're called for. And so this is a troubling stat for me. And again, why I would encourage you to listen to this show if you're a young believer is because there aren't that many resources out there for you if you are moving towards the goal of marriage. And I think Landon and I provide a lot of value on that front. It's not like I'm just saying listen to our show because there's nothing else. I think we really work hard to make this show generate a lot of value for young believers who are trying to get married. But my point is we could use a lot more. We can't do it all by ourselves. So if you guys are interested in doing something like this, reach out and let us know if you're interested in becoming involved in the show in any way. If you're behind the vision that we kind of have that marriage is not only a good thing, but something that you should pursue as young as possible and something that you should prioritize above lots of other things in life, then reach out and let us know through the link in the show notes. You can send us an audio voice message asking us how you can get involved, or just send us a message and we can definitely get you involved in the show. We would love to start growing this podcast into more than it is. So definitely consider that if you feel so called to be involved in a marriage ministry. The next slide that we have here says that 96% of all evangelical churches reported spending 0% of their ministry budget on singles or healthy dating ministry, and 97% of churches reported spending 0% of their ministry budget on singles or healthy dating ministry. So 96 to 97%, guys. So we have evangelical churches are spending a little bit less. All churches are spending a little bit more, but still just it's 1%, I mean, It's truly, yeah, shocking to me. Landon, have you just how many churches have you been to out of curiosity in this area?
For more than once or
Just visited. Just visited.
visited,
Yeah.
maybe somewhere between 5 and 7 ish,
Okay. Yeah.
just off the top of my head.
Yeah. I think that's pretty normal just because a lot of people will go with a friend or their family who
Right.
goes to somewhere
Well, and
else.
like, especially in youth ministry,
Yeah.
um,
Oh yes, yes.
we had something called Fusion, and it was a large group of
Mm,
churches, and we would have youth led services
right.
once every like 3 months, and we would
Yeah.
alternate which church would house those. So,
Right. Out of those 5 to 7, and again, where you were just visiting some of them, how many of them would you say placed emphasis on, in the amount of ministries they had, placed emphasis on not only equipping young people to get married, but sustaining couples who were already married? How many of them had marriage ministries that they promoted above, so let's say, missions?
right. Promoted above missions, I think you're looking at zero.
Right. Okay. That's what I was gonna say. Right.
But I'm even having the class, you're looking at maybe 2 out of the 7 ish that even
Right.
have it.
Mm-hmm. I was trying to run that question in my own head. I've been to this past year. I haven't been to very many at all, but or I'm sorry, this year I haven't been to very many at all. The past year I went to probably 10 or 15, and of those churches that I went to, as part of my finding a spouse strategy, very few of them. I'm kind of in the same boat with Landon. And again, I don't want to condemn them wholesale because I did not become involved in all of those churches to the point to where I knew where they were, doing the most ministry. So I could have visited a church that was doing a lot of marriage ministry and I just simply didn't know about it. But based on how they presented themselves to, a newcomer, marriage was not really their focus. Encouraging people to get married was not really their focus. Equipping young people to get married was not really their focus. And sustaining the marriages that were already in the congregation and making those marriages healthier was not really their focus either. So marriage therapy is not really, does not really come into the equation a lot. A lot of churches will have what they call premarital counseling. So that's really good, just equipping young people to, before prior to entering the marriage covenant, just making sure that they are, know what's coming down the pike for them. And I think those are great. But something I would encourage you guys to do is, a lot this gets into the issue of how much weight is being put on pastors, but a lot of weight is being put on pastors today, to do a lot of jobs and a lot of functions, that frankly that burden is too heavy often for them to bear while managing a healthy family life of their own. And most pastors are married in the Protestant church, and so what either happens is pastors end up prioritizing their ministry above their family and having an unhealthy family life, sadly. And I think I know what Landon's going to say to that in a minute. But another thing that can happen is that they will, be stretched too thin where they're actually creating an unhealthy living situation on themselves. Let's say they are prioritizing their family and spending enough time with their family and pouring into their family as much as they should as a husband and a father. They're also stretched too thin with their other work that it's taking a toll on their physical health and their emotional and mental health. And so I think what we need to do is take this responsibility of encouraging people to get married and equipping them to be married once they're in the covenant away from pastoral leaders and kind of taking that responsibility on ourselves, guys. I mean, if you have a healthy marriage, or if you have the ability to help somebody in the area of dating or marriage, I would say a lot of us, that's a responsibility that you are free to take on and basically take it away from people who are overcommitted. And so I would encourage you, just if you want to get involved again in this show, or if you want to start something of your own, I would encourage you to do so because there's definitely a need. You're going to start seeing through these stats that there's definitely a need for marriage ministries. And so you can be a part of that. You don't have to leave it to a church leader. You don't have to leave it to what you would call a quote unquote expert. You can definitely be involved in that. But Landon, what are your thoughts on kind of how pastors are stretched a little bit too thin and the toll it's taking on them to be both in full-time ministry and in full-time ministry in their home?
I mean, the simple answer is just point to the Catholics. I mean, you can give them a win on this one, and I think that You know,
I knew it.
there's something to be said about having a pastor who is married, and having that person there for both you and your wife because they have
Hmm.
experienced certain things that you are experiencing.
Hmm.
But it's like what you said, that ministry doesn't have to be for a pastor or a
Right.
priest. That
Right.
ministry does not. There's no regulation that you have to be a you know minister to
Hmm.
do this. So to me, it's like, okay, we need to stop putting so much expectations on married men
Hmm.
in the church. And then what does that do? Well, it opens a door for single men, and single in the case that we talk about singleness, and fully committing your life to the Lord. And I think that that's very important, is that when we look at these people that are leading us, are they fully committed in their life to the Lord? Um,
Hmm.
I, I I cannot, in a vain way, we all want to say that we are. But
Mm.
at the same time, I cannot minister to every single person around me when I have my child and my wife with me.
Hmm.
It puts them in unsafe situations sometimes.
Hmm.
So, if we're brutally honest with ourselves, it is going to be much, 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 much harder to fully commit our lives to the Lord while
Hmm.
also doing what we are obligated to do as a husband. So I think that
Yeah.
that just the very basic answer to that would be, okay, well, don't be a husband or don't be a priest.
Right.
Like,
And I
for
think
me, it makes
it's
sense.
it's pretty common sense. I agree with you there. And I think there's a strong scriptural argument for this as well, as far as Paul having the gift of singleness and devoting his life wholly to God to spread the gospel,
Hmm.
remaining unmarried so that his attention was not divided in that front. So if basically you want to live that way, it's probably going to be, unscriptural for you to be married in the sense of, I mean, like 1 Timothy 5, I'll just share that with you guys here, says that, but if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. So if you're not providing for your own, if you're not taking care of your own, if you're not looking after your own, if you're not taking care of your family emotionally, physically, financially, then if you're not presiding over them in the way that they need you to do, then you're basically, the Bible has strong words for you. I mean, you're worse than an unbeliever. He has denied the faith. Those are extremely strong words to level at somebody. And I don't want to take this verse out of context. If you want to go back and read the full passage, it's 1 Timothy 5. Widows have been discussed a lot leading up to this verse, but let's read that again. But if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. So, I mean, like, it's very important that you take care of your own. It's very important that you take care of your family. It's very important that you take care of what God has given you. And so, I mean, I figured Landon was going to say that. I thought he was going to come out of the gates swinging and say, like, hey, if you're a priest, you probably shouldn't get married. And that's why Landon likes the Catholic tradition on that front, is because priests are not torn between taking care of their family and serving
Hmm.
in the church. They are not torn by that, and in doing so, in not being torn by that, they are, basically preventing a life of dysfunction for the people that
Well,
they
and
love
you
most.
you have to just, even if you don't agree with the Catholic Church saying that you cannot
Hmm.
get married and
Hmm.
lead the church, you have to at least admit that when you look at it from the outside, it is obviously going to make things easier. It would
Yeah.
be like if I came to Seth and said, "Hey, I would like to work for you, but I'm also going to work for this other company, and
Hmm.
the hours are going to be a little messy, and they may want me to work sometimes, and then I may have to do some things for you, and vice
Hmm.
versa." Um, I'm probably gonna, you would probably look at me and go, I think you need to commit to something.
Hmm.
We'll take care of you. Just commit to one of the other.
Hmm.
Um, but if I came to you and said, "Hey, I quit my job. I have nothing but time to do what you need me to do. I would like to come and work for you." I'm going to be a better employee for you if I have
Hmm.
no other obligation.
Right.
It makes
Yes.
sense. It's common sense that
It's logical. Yeah.
if you don't have if you have something else that's going to draw away from your effort, then you can't put all of your effort into one thing. So one of the two is going to feel neglected, if not both.
Right. And that's exactly what you see happening today. I mean, today the Gospel Coalition recently put out a post that says, when the pastor's wife wants to quit, and it says, I couldn't walk away from the body of Christ because I know Jesus loved her. And my answer is, well, hey, maybe your husband should be serving his family instead of the body of Christ in this situation, because he chose to get married. And I think Landon's 100% right there. And as you can see, the comments of this post, guys, on your screen are just full of people saying, I've been there. I feel the pain of that statement because I am there too.
And
Ministry life is hard. The wounds cut deep.
This is such a hard subject with so much nuance.
Yes.
Because there is a Protestant understanding of putting God first that I don't think the Catholics have in the same view. If I am married, the best way for me to put God first is to show God to my wife and my children.
Amen.
I genuinely believe that. I believe that there's a reason why our first commandment was be fruitful and multiply.
Right.
I believe that is our obligation when we get into these situations. And I think that we've kind of mangled together things that we probably shouldn't have mangled together. I also think, and this is just my personal opinion, I don't want anybody to, get tore up about this, but I think there's something to be said about how young some pastors are nowadays. Because when you're older and you've been married to your wife for 35, 40 years, your kids are grown and, they're out doing their own thing, I think it would be easier for a Protestant pastor to spend more time in the church and serving the church, because the foundation was already set in the relationship that he now has to give a little less effort to. I think that what one problem may be is that you have a young pastor with a young wife, and their relationship needs more effort than it would in 50 years. Just looking at my own grandparents, I can tell you, the amount of time they spend together, those type of things, it starts to dwindle a bit, not in a way that is that they don't want to spend time together, but that they have other fruits of their love. And it's not just spending time and getting to know each other. It's loving on their children and going and doing certain things. And I think that it's easier to go and do those things and support the church when you aren't in a more base level relationship. And I think it takes time to develop that. So maybe that is another reason why we're seeing some of this stuff about wives wanting to leave and not wanting to be a part of the ministry, is because they need more effort than, say, a 70-year-old retired guy, because he needs, he has more time to spend with the congregation.
I mean, what breaks my heart is the conclusion that this particular pastor's wife, Glenna Marshall, has come to, saying, basically, she's saying in this quote that you see on your screen that she's come to the conclusion that she basically needs to give up the desire to spend more time with her husband because Christ loves the church and her husband is taking care of the church. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions that we have in the church today is this idea that full-time ministry is limited to basically the office of pastoral giftings. And basically full-time ministry is limited to a salary employee that works for an institutional church. And I think full-time ministry, as Landon said just a minute ago, is way more broad than that and encompasses fathers and husbands who are revealing God to their wife, serving their wife as Christ served the church, serving their children, the fruit of that marriage as Christ served the church. And so I think when we say full-time ministry, I believe we all, it's a very cliche statement to say that you need to be in ministry. But I think more people are in ministry than consider themselves to be in ministry, because there are a lot of husbands and fathers who are serving their family and putting their family first in the way God has called them to do. And they wouldn't consider that ministry, even though it is.
And this is a little bit off base, but I think you all will be able to see where this ties in. And, when I was younger, when I was a teen, maybe middle school age, I went to a lot of church camps and youth revivals and things of that nature. And in the non-denominational evangelical church, whatever you want to call it, there was a time, and I think it's gotten a little bit better nowadays, but there was a time where a large portion of what we were talked to about was our calling. What are you called to do?
Right.
What is the Lord calling you to do? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that's important to seek out. But when you speak to someone who is so young about their calling, or in other words, vocation, I think that you have to be very careful on how you speak to those people about callings, because it's not always just a calling to, are you going to be a pastor, a worship pastor, a youth pastor? Those are the big three. Are you going to go to children's church pastor? Like, who are you going to teach, or what are you going to do in the band? That's kind of the extent of what our callings were. When you're
Exactly.
15 years old, and people are talking about getting a calling from God. That's all you've seen, really.
Right.
And it's what's appealing to you. You like how this guy goes up on stage and talks with a certain authority. You like how this person goes on stage and sings well, and But what we need to be very specific about is that sometimes you're just called to be a dad.
Amen. Absolutely, dude.
Sometimes you're just called to be a husband, and other times you're called to be a pastor, and that's all
Amen.
of those are awesome. But what we have to realize is that when we feel that God is calling us to something, we have to give that full effort, or else it's not going to properly translate in the world.
Right. Right.
I think that when we go out into the world and people see a father, a pastor, a grandfather, there's a comfort there. But me personally, when I look at somebody who's completely devoted their lives to the church, there's something noble about that translates beyond just being a Christian. I was watching a video earlier today, and it was like, which this person was not a Christian, but I thought that they were hit the nail on the head, and they were talking about some pastors are rich and some pastors are poor. And the rich pastors have a very alluring, when they try to convince you, it's very alluring. But when the poor pastors try to convince you, it's not alluring, it's noble, and you can see they really mean what they are saying. And I think that in order to get that through to non-Christians, you have to really be about it, and you have to really commit to that.
Yeah.
So I think that, when we talk about bringing this back in is, do we have these ministries for marriage prep? Do we have them for continuing a healthy marriage? If we are going to say that we want more marriages and want more life in marriage, we have to be about it. We can preach about it all day, but
Right.
we have to be about it. And the pastors, I think that, I don't want to condemn anybody, but I think that if you are a pastor and you are not serving your family, because here's the thing, you already have a flock. When I talk about, maybe people who are married shouldn't be pastors, or maybe, young married people shouldn't be pastors, you already have a flock. I'm not telling you to abandon that church. That's not at all what I would say. What I would say is that if you want other people to respect marriage in the same way that you do, you have to be about it. And I think that one way you can serve your congregation is by leading by example.
Right.
Not just leading it behind not just leading behind the podium, actually leading by example and showing how a loving husband and a loving father looks.
And as you can see, guys, I mean, it's not like everybody's having the same approach to this. The Catholics are doing a little bit better as far as the marriage prep that they afford. 74% of Catholic parishes reported having ministry for marriage prep, and only 8% of evangelical
And when
churches
you
had
look at
that.
that, though, the Catholic Church is not, from what I've seen and what I've looked into, it's not the priest that is leading these
Right.
marriage counseling
And that's
groups.
very important. Right.
And I think that that is where we as Protestants do not really step up to the task, because it doesn't have to be your pastor that does everything.
Yes, it
Like,
all goes back to putting too much weight on him, putting too much
yes.
weight on other people. And like, guys, you have a charge, you have a responsibility to be a functioning member of the body. Just to read you a little passage from 1 Corinthians here, for the body is not one part but many. If the foot says, because I'm not the hand, I'm not part of the body, it is for this reason any part of the body. And if the ear says, because I am not the eye, I am not a part of the body, it is for this reason any less a part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the hearing be? If the whole body were hearing, where would the sense of smell be? But now God has arranged the parts, each one of them in the body, just as he desired. If they were all one part, where would the body be? But now there are many parts, but one body. And my point there is, like, pastors are doing a small role. They have their job. They're operating in their spiritual gifting, but we have limited spiritual giftings to only the offices that are available in the church. Like Landon said, it's like when you're young, you can either be a Sunday school teacher, a preacher, a musician, or a something like that, maybe an evangelist. But there's so many other giftings and ways of ministering to people that are available out there. For example, this show, which is ministering to a very small, niche category of believers, and those are young believers who are trying to get married as soon as possible. That's an actual need that Landon and I are trying to minister to. There's an actual group that needs help in that area, and we're choosing to step in here and do that because it's frankly an area that's been neglected. It's a ministry that's been neglected, and so you can't say that one is less than the other. You can't say that being a father is less of a calling, less of a ministry than being a pastor, or vice versa. It's like, okay, operate in the calling that you've been given, the assignment that you've been given to the fullest, absolute way you can. Absolute. You just dominate in your area of ministry. So if you're a father, you need to be the best father that has ever walked the face of the earth. Like, that needs to be your goal. You need to be, if you're a husband, you need to be the best husband that has ever walked the face of the earth. That needs to be your goal. And so, and pastors, if you're a pastor, and that kind of gets into the nuance here of, can pastors be married, and the whole debate around that. But a lot of women, I would say, just to draw your guys' attention to it, a lot of women and families are suffering because their pastor father is spending a lot of his time and effort and energy in a field, and then coming home and basically giving his family the leftovers and the scraps. And I think that is what's wrong with a lot of churches today, and that's what a lot of people are seeing negative problems in. But Landon, have you even seen that in your own life, or is that just kind of my sample bias? Have you ever seen basically pastors or teachers who are giving like 110% to their flock, but not 110% at home?
I mean, not in a way that is so close that I can give the detail, but you can definitely see the fruits of that. I think that my pastor at my Protestant church is now a grandfather, and is they're retired and they have more time together, and I think that kind of plays a part in the success of their marriage. But he also takes a more hands-off approach, and he gives himself more time to just be a husband.
Right.
And
That's awesome.
I'm not going to tell him that I think that he he shouldn't have been married.
Or he shouldn't have been a pastor.
Right,
Either
or
one,
that
yeah.
he shouldn't have been a pastor. But I think that it would have been easier. It would
Right.
have been more
Right.
beneficial. I think there would have been less stress. But I think that the path is there, and it's already when you already have a flock, and I would want him to fulfill the needs of the flock.
Right. A lot of people hear Lane and I talking, and you might be tempted to think, okay, well, we're giving people advice who are in a season beyond our own. And that's literally not at all what we're doing. We're simply encouraging people who are moving to where we are and beyond. Hey, if you're going to move in this direction, there are some red flags and some potholes that you're going to want to avoid. And if you choose this road doing this, your life might be a little bit harder, and that's something for you to consider going in.
I think it's so silly because
Yeah.
I'm like, imagine you're driving down a highway and I'm in the middle. the people listening right now to the show are behind me, and then the people I'm talking about are in front of me. I just watched him swerve and hit a guardrail, and I then call the person behind me and say, "Hey, don't swerve and hit that guardrail." Am I giving advice based off of something I've not experienced? Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
but I've witnessed it, and I can make an assumption based off
Absolutely.
of what I've witnessed.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm not speaking to the person who just hit the guardrail. I'm not going to go up to him and be like, "Hey, man, you shouldn't have done that." Like these people already know,
Right.
and I'm more speaking to the people behind me that are saying, "Hey, I want to get married," but I also feel like I'm maybe called
To this ministry, right?
well,
Yeah.
you need to really make sure, because how's your wife going to feel about that?
Right.
Are you being
Amen.
open? Are you being open to your wife, and how are you going to feel about that? Because right now what we're seeing is the husband becomes the pastor, and then the wife takes a role in the church. Well, now are you really going to have time, just the two of you? Are you really going to be able to just sow into your marriage, or are you going to be constantly sowing into the church? And there's nothing wrong with sowing into the church, trust me, but when you try to do that other than sowing into your marriage, where are you going to end up? What's going to end up happening? And everybody wants to believe like, oh, well, me and my wife, we have a strong bond, and nothing would ever come between us. And it's like, okay, we'll see, I guess, but I'll pray for you. Like,
yeah. I mean, it really comes down to the fact that people need to understand that they're finite. They have limited resources. They have limited energy. They have limited attention that they can give to the things in their life. And so people who say, yeah, I'm really gung-ho about being a father and a husband, but also here on the side, I'd like to go into full-time, what they would call ministry. They're really saying, what I would say they're doing is they're saying I would like to pursue full-time 2 areas of ministry, and that's being a father and a husband, and also being a pastor of a congregation. And in which case, if you're doing that, it's very hard. If you're doing it successfully, I would commend you, and I would be in awe of your ability to actually manage your resources. But my point is that that's not a road that everybody's capable of walking. And so just be aware going in. If you feel like God is calling you to the goal of marriage and family, don't get distracted. I think what a lot of people do is they try to become a master of all, a jack of all trades and a master of none. Really, is they want to be a so-so husband and father and be a so-so husband or a pastor on the side. And it's like, okay, you can do that, or you can operate to a really high level in one of those fields, and that's something that you just need to be aware of.
Well, and I would say that, you talked about being a so-so pastor. I think that most of the time, and this is just based off of what I've seen, I think that most of the time, the people who are going to suffer is your family. Because
absolutely, yes.
When I'm at work and I'm tired, I'm not comfortable around the people at work in the same way that I am my wife. So,
dude, isn't that so true? Yeah,
I'm not going to act out at work, but when I get home and I'm really tired, I'm comfortable enough with my wife to where I will be like, "Honey, I'm tired. I don't want to deal
I'm convicted." Yeah, I'm convicted.
So it's like when you talk about, well, I'm going to give my all to my wife, and then I will be a pastor. It's like, no, because those people are going to demand more of you, and you're not going to be comfortable enough with those people to say, no, I need to be with my wife. But you know who you are comfortable enough with? Your wife. And you're going to tell her, no, the congregation needs me.
That is so true. And that is so messed up. And I'm so convicted right now just hearing you. That doesn't just apply to pastors. That applies to anybody who works outside the home. What I often find is that my work gets, the better part of me, and my wife coming home, I'm tempted to give her the leftovers of whatever I've got left from the workday. And that is, to me, is so dysfunctional and wrong. I mean, what's the higher priority here? What's the higher priority here? Is it your wife, or is it the means that you use to support your wife? I mean, even the means that you use to support your wife was for the end of having a wife. Why would you prioritize that above the actual treasure itself? And yet that's what we often do. And I think I think Landon hit the nail on the head there. It's because we would be perceived as lazy or bad workers or people who are not giving our all 110% in our workplace if we saved the best part of ourselves for our wife. And so because of that, we choose to, give our 110% at work to every, decision that comes to us during the day. And so we get home and we're burnt out, and we have nothing left to give our family. And I think that is one of the biggest struggles that you husbands are going to have, not only going into marriage, but for those of you who are just newly married, you're probably starting to see that in your own life as well. I know I have, and Landon has as well. But that's why I think it's really important that we just strive to be good husbands before we strive to be good in our workplaces and before we strive to be, and it's great to be good in your workplace. I'm not discouraging that. Like, you should be high functioning in your workplace, but I'm just saying your wife should be the priority here. Your kids should be the priority here. Your family.
If you have taken on so much responsibility that by the time you get home, you can't take care of the responsibilities.
Exactly.
You need
Yes.
to reevaluate.
Amen.
I
Yes.
think that, and I'm not even condemning anybody. I think that eventually I
Right.
will have to reevaluate. I think
I'm already
everyone at
doing it.
some point, I think
Yeah.
everybody at some point is going to have to.
Mm-hmm.
I had to reevaluate where I was, what I was giving more to once we had Walker. It was
Yeah.
like, okay, well, they need more of my effort. Am I able to give more? What
Yeah.
am I giving at work right now? And then, that's a part of it. And
Amen.
we live in a world that is like, oh, well, no matter what you do, give 110%. It's like, no, I have a little bit left in the tank. I need to make sure that I have more left in the tank when I get home than what I
Right.
use at
Amen.
work.
There's a priority list.
My
Absolutely.
8 hours at work, even if it's just for 10 hours at home before we go to
Mm-hmm.
bed, I need to be there. I need to
Mm-hmm.
be active. I need to be attentive. I need to make sure that
Mm-hmm.
what's needed is done,
Mm-hmm.
and what they not even what they need, but what they emotionally want is there for them.
Yeah. One of the favorite quotes that I've ever heard from a pastor in relationship to this whole conversation between workplace and married life is from Chris Valentin, and he says to his wife and kids, quote, "I do not have I can't remember if he uses the word concubine or something like that, a secondary on the side woman that you are competing with called the church. You have and then that's where the end quote comes in. You have my full attention here at home. You're my number one priority. After that comes my, responsibility to my flock. And I think that's got to be how it is. And again, I that's why I think people who are like Paul in the New Testament are cut out so well to be pastors, because if they're not called to marriage and they're called instead to that full-time, promotion of the gospel and service, then they're going to have a lot easier time because they're able to give 110% to that first thing. Again, not being super condemning to people who are married and in, church ministry. But I'm just talking to you young people. That is something to be aware of. And that's why I really appreciate ministries like Communio here. Here they have a little wheel on your screen of kind of their goal for their ministry. It's for the single life part, they establish healthy dating habits and encourage marriage discernment. So they're basically equipping singles to pursue the goal of marriage and do so in a healthy way, healthy dating habits. And then they have their next one is marriage preparation. So couples basically assess compatibility and work with mentors before and after their wedding. So basically equipping people to who are just about to step across the line into marriage for what they're going to be, facing. And then their next one is, ministry for marriages who are in need, basically struggling couples who are trying to save their marriage. And then their final category that they minister in is marriage enrichment. So married couples continually learning skills to strengthen their relationship. So that should be the one that you want to aim for. You want to skip step 3 here, guys. You don't want to be the guy that goes into marriage and, has gone through the marriage prep, has gone through the counseling, has got a good mentor, and he goes in and then he starts prioritizing his workplace above his family, comes home, gives his family the scraps, and then suddenly it all explodes, his life falls apart, and he finds his marriage in need of saving. Like, you don't want to be that guy. You want to be the guy who goes into marriage understanding what the temptations are going to be, understanding what the pitfalls are, understanding where the potholes are, and avoids those potholes entirely based on the advice and seasoned mentorship of those around you, and moves into the marriage enrichment stage where you're just basically trying to make your marriage better than it is, even if it's in great shape. And so that's kind of what your goal should be. I think those are all really good goals. But again, this has been a really good article so far. Just to give you a couple more stats from it, 53% of all churches report having an ongoing marriage ministry. So that is a little bit more encouraging to me. There you can see on your screen there a little graphic. 53%, so just barely over half. I mean, that's a lot better than the last percentage we read. So slightly more encouraging, but my point is we still have a long way to go. 63% of evangelical churches report having an ongoing marriage ministry. 35% of mainline churches report having an ongoing marriage ministry. 39% of Catholic parishes report having an ongoing marriage ministry. And so my point is it's basically a need that it's a ministry that's not being filled today. So I would encourage you, if you want to get involved in this field in any way, reach out and let us know. We will do our best to get you guys hooked up in that way. And again, I hope we've generated value for you guys today. I hope we've been an encouragement to you believers who are working towards getting married as young as possible in a healthy way. Elaine and I are really passionate about this. We love what we do. We love having deep discussions together. Doing a lot of really cool stuff in the coming year that we want to just put our whole selves into. But my point is we would never do that at the cost of our own marriages. Like if it's going to start impacting, our relationship with our wife, we're going to have to back off. And this podcast really is my accountability plan for that. Like I've been talking for 5 years now about the importance of prioritizing my wife above, my hobbies, my individual pursuits, my means of bringing bread to the table. And so if I start putting more into this podcast or more into my teaching position or more into my passive income plans than I do into my relationship with my wife, there's going to be quite a few people who are going to be able to call me on it, So this is kind of my accountability plan for that. I always want to be giving way more to my wife than I am to my job, way more to my wife than I am to my friends, way more to my wife than I am to anything other than God. Really, that's really what my priority list comes down to. And so I hope this has encouraged you guys. Keep me accountable. Reach out and let us know if you want to become involved in what we do here or just the marriage ministry field in general. We really would love to help you in that area. But thank you guys so much for listening today. We're going to go ahead and wrap up. If you enjoyed the content that you heard in these episodes, reach out and let us know what you thought of the content we discussed. And I do want to give you guys kind of a question here to just wrap up our interviews. I do want to kind of start doing a question that I give you guys at the very end of every episode. And so this question to you this week is going to be, who is somebody that you think would be an awesome person to interview on the show? So as a listener, who is somebody that you think would be an awesome person for us to interview on the show? Leave their name either in the comments on Spotify or on social media, or just send us a voice message with their name, telling us a little bit about their ministry, etc. And also, as kind of a secondary question is, how are you going to take the information today that you've heard and put it into action? As Brett McKay would say in the Art of Manliness podcast, how are you going to take the information that there is a lack of marriage ministry going on in the church and step up to the bat? And for example, you don't even have to start a huge ministry in the sense of a big business that is, a big deal. Just mentor a couple who is behind you by a couple years, mentor a couple who is about to enter a season that you have been through. And that's a way of fulfilling this and allocating the responsibility of marriage ministry to the entire church instead of just a few tiny people, tiny pastors who are already overworked within the church. You have a role to play. Mentor somebody. Guys, mentor somebody. If you've been mentored by somebody, just pass it on. Pass the baton, pass the gauntlet. I would say it's your duty to do so. And it's just, being thoughtful for the person that comes after you and not just being stingy with the advice and wisdom that you've been given. So thank you guys so much for listening today. Consider those questions. Let me know what the answers to those questions are in the comments. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we will talk to you all next time.